The Center Region Active Adult Center is a vibrant, inclusive, and happening location designed for active adults, 55 years and over, to be social and participate in new experiences while also staying close to home. We promote healthy aging through our many activities and health forums, as well as lifelong learning through classes and social interaction that suit almost any lifestyle. Whether you prefer line dancing followed by a walk, or a game of bridge and a meal, the center is sure to have something for you. Visit crpr.org for more info.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
I'd like to call to order the June 2nd, 2025 Committee of the Whole Regular Board Meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. All who are able, please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us in person this evening and those viewing remotely from home. I'd like to announce the board held an executive session prior to this meeting regarding personnel, student discipline, real estate, and legal, including case number 4:23CV-01144-MWB. Board members, with the agenda before you, are there any changes? Okay. Seeing none, then I'd like to ask the board secretary to conduct a roll call of board members.
Dr. Anderson?
Here.
Dr. Bader?
Here.
Dr. Buck?
Here.
Dr. Rappaport? Dr. Eno?
Here.
Ms. Huff?
Here.
Mr. Colby?
Here.
Dr. Miller?
Present.
Thank you. So next we're going to move on to communications. Thanks, Lynn. I'd like to just comment the June marks the beginning of Pride Month, which is a recognition of the Stonewall riots and the inclusion of the LGBTQIA community. Additionally, I'd like to share a few pieces of exciting news this evening. Pennsylvania has been awarded $22.5 million in grants to 73 Pennsylvania has awarded $22.5 million in grants to 73 schools across the state as part of the Department of Community and Economic Development's Solar for Schools program. These grants, which provide up to $500,000 per school, are designed to support the installation of solar energy systems, offering both environmental benefits and the potential for substantial long-term savings on energy costs. We are proud to announce that the State College Area School District is among the recipients of this grant. This funding will help us take a significant step forward in our sustainability efforts while also reducing operational costs over time. It's a win-win for our schools, our students, and our community. More details will be shared as we move forward with the planning and implementation process, but we're thrilled to be part of this forward-thinking initiative. In addition, the Power Purchase Agreement won the Lodestar Award, the highest honor for a solar project in Pennsylvania. Peter, do you have anything you'd like to add regarding that?
I do, and it's a good thing and a sort of annoying thing that just happened, of course. So we have been named an awardee, but we thought until every single member of the group had signed, which will not happen by this Thursday, that we should not receive the award formally. So we've been told, after we gave this information back to the PA Solar Center, this just happened, that we should receive it next year. And they were like, yeah, great, we look forward to giving it to you next year. So we won but didn't win but still win.
Okay.
But I have another good piece of information.
Sure.
And that is that we will be recognized by the World Resources Institute as a leader in solar aggregation in an upcoming series that they're doing. The World Resources Institute is among the world's leading non-governmental organizations in renewable energy and climate action, and I take it as an incredible honor that we would be included in this cohort. So we move on.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great news. All right, I'd like to move on to the superintendent update. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Bader. State College Area High School received the 2025 School of Distinction Gold Award from the Jostens Renaissance Program, which honors schools for improving climate and culture. Out of 140 recognized schools across the U.S. and Canada, only 3 are in Pennsylvania. No school in the state earned platinum, with State High being the sole gold level 1. Congratulations to all of the State High faculty, staff, and administrators for this impressive accolade. A special thank you goes to Jennifer Evans, the school-wide PBIS high school coach, for her dedication and leadership in making a positive impact on school climate and culture. So, thank you.
So now we're going to move on to Angel Henward. Is this your last meeting? One more. Okay. I wasn't sure if we were going to manage to
I'll
keep
be
you
continuing
after
throughout the summer.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So would you like to share student initiatives?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Dr. Bader. Kudos to the State High Thespians for receiving 4 awards from the 20th Annual Isaacs Awards for their spring production, You're in Town. Lucas Snyder won in the Best Supporting Actor in a Male Role category for his performance as Officer Lockstock. In addition, State College garnered runner-up awards in 2 categories: Best Ensemble for, quote, The Law, Number, and Student Crew, consisting of Ivan Atwood, Jesse Kozine, Eros Hernandez, and Alex Sisler for set construction. Each school also selected a cast or crew member as their production's Isaacs MVP. State College's honor went to an assistant stage manager, Addie Marshall. Capping the evening, State College received the Isaac Mishler Award for Professionalism for the first time. Congratulations to the State College Boys Track and Field team for winning the 2025 PIAA Track and Field Championship. On the strength of an impressive 3 gold medals, State College captured the title with 53 points, far ahead of second place's Palmyra's 28 points. Jesse Myers won the 200-meter dash and notched a 4th place finish in the 100. Adam Bell and Nate Haas captured titles in the pole vault and javelin, respectively, with Haas also placing 4th in the discus. Adding to State College's medal count, Isaac Opperman won a bronze in the 3,200-meter race with a school record time. The 4x8 relay team of Luke Bradbury, Stephen Fowler, Kyle Fritchie, and Owen Coughlin placed 5th, and Landon Bassett finished 6th in the long jump. For head track and field coach Artie Gillix, the championship was his 3rd, coming after 2019 and 2021 in his 7 years leading the program. In the girls' competition, State College finished 9th, led by Sinai Abdullah's silver medal in the long jump and bronze medal in the triple jump. Hats off to the Delta 6th grade team for taking first in the nation in this year's Spring Thinking Cap Quiz Bowl competition. Nora Wang, Josie Hughes, Kirby McCutcheon, Oscar Goldberg, Ollie Kissling, Samuel Adler Ortiz, Vinnie Gratz, and Blake Schulman topped the field in the trivia competition, where students worked together to answer questions from a broad range of categories. Stellar performances in the Intermediate Math League of Pennsylvania season added up to a remarkable showing for district middle school students. Across 5 competitions, district students notched 14 of the 15 top overall scores, with Emil Itzkov-Kurto, Viniv Manga, Isabel Song, and Miranda Zhu recording perfect seasons. Congratulations to all the competitors.
Thank you. That's great. End of the year is always exciting with lots of these accomplishments. Jackie, do you have some legislative updates for us?
Yeah.
Do we have a middle schooler in the audience
We
that
do.
was listed?
We do.
You want to stand and get it going on?
All right, I brought a page of notes, but I'm going to try to be concise. So this legislative update is exclusively about the Pennsylvania State Legislature. So Representative Mary Isaacson introduced HB 1500, which was actually passed through the Education Committee already today. This is the updated cyber charter school financing reform bill that has been discussed extensively. It would include a $8,000 regular ed tuition for cyber charter students. And so it would start at $8,000 and increase yearly based on a few factors that I'd be happy to fill you guys in on later if you have that, if you want to know that detail. Special ed students would be an $8,000 tuition as well, plus an amount tied to special ed tiered categories. So that would be great. There's also going to be, like, the bill also proposes an increased transparency and reporting of advertising and sponsorship from cyber charter schools. It would limit the fund balance so that it could not exceed 12% of the expenditures. There would be a cyber charter moratorium until 2029, so the state would not be able to grant any additional cyber charters if this bill passed as written. Yeah. And then, so I'll stop there a little. I have a lot of details in the weeds if you want to know more. But I have contacted both Representative Tikak and Representative Conklin and encouraged them to co-sign onto this bill, and would encourage you all to consider doing the same.
Thanks, Jack.
Sorry, did you say that the bill was introduced today, or?
I'm so sorry. It was introduced last week and it was passed through the House Education Committee today.
Okay, just the House.
Correct.
Okay.
And
thank
just
you.
the committee. So it hasn't even been on the floor of the House yet.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Center Region Council of Governments Liaison. Peter, do you have anything to share with us tonight?
I do not.
Okay. Then we're going to move on to public comment. We now have time for public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes for items related to board business that are not a consent or action item this evening. For those items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item. Please, we have, I think, one advanced sign up, Tim Haas. So if Tim is here this evening in person, yeah, if you want to come up to the podium and if you could just share your name and where you reside in the district. Sorry, this one up here. And you're free to make your comment. You'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Tim Haas. I reside in State College Borough and have children at Easterly Parkway, 2 children, a boy and a girl in 4th and 2nd grade. Well, finishing up this year, so.
Yeah.
Go?
Yeah.
Okay. As I mentioned, my name's Tim. My wife and I are here on behalf of our 2 children who I just mentioned. We have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old that are finishing up 4th and 2nd grade this year. But tonight, I'm here to speak specifically on behalf of our daughter. And I want to be clear from the onset, what brings us here, it's not anger or any type of intolerance. It's really just a concern, and it's a deep concern. And it's genuine for our daughter's well-being and the environment that she and many other children are being asked to navigate each and every day. We've been told that the district's priority is to ensure that every student feels safe, supported, and included. But from our perspective, that mission is failing because the way it's being implemented is putting kids like our daughter on the back burner. It's prioritizing one student's identity over the comfort, privacy, and emotional securities of many others. I'll be direct. Our daughter, a biologically female child, has been made to feel that she should avoid using the girls' restroom in order to accommodate a student who is born male. The result is that she's the one changing her routine and she's adapting her behavior. We don't feel that this is balanced and we don't feel it's equitable. We're not here to diminish anyone's identity or experiences. We believe that transgender students deserve compassion, care, and support, but their rights and needs should not come at the cost of making other students feel invisible or uncomfortable. In an effort to be inclusive, we fear that the district is unintentionally sending a message that the feelings of one student can override the concerns of many others. And when families like ours raise these issues and talk about these concerns, we're met with silence, dismissal, and sometimes even labels. This isn't about labels, it's not about politics, it's about practical realities and the emotional lives of our young children. It's about asking hard questions that deserve thoughtful answers. So here's what we're asking. We're asking to please stop placing the burden of adjustment on the majority of the students. We're asking to reintroduce balance and common sense practices into these conversations and decisions, and treat every child's comfort and dignity as equally worthy of protection, not just those in the spotlight. We want our daughter to grow up respecting others, but we also want her to know that her voice matters too. This isn't that she isn't required to stay silent or change who she is to avoid conflict. So I'll wrap with this question. If the goal of education is to serve all children, then why are some children being quietly sacrificed in the name of progress for others? Thank you.
Thank you. So that completes our pre-registered sign-up people. If we have others here in person or online who are interested in making a public comment about items not on the consent or action item this evening, we have time for that as well. Do we have anyone online? No. Okay. Anyone else here in person? All right, then we'll conclude public comment. We're going to start off with our committee of the whole, and that's going to begin with Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee. We're going to have 4 reports from that department. I'd like to call on Ms. Christine Merritt and Ms. Danielle Yoder. They're going to give us an overview of some restructuring that's occurring at the administrative level.
Good evening, everyone. So I do not have a presentation, but I just want to talk to you a little bit about the changes that we set forth in the memo for a currently open position. As you know, Dr. Jonathan Klingeman left us, and Ms. Bola also has resigned from a pretty massive MTSS director role. And it started out a little bit smaller, and then as we continued the work of MTSS and different programming got changed to really focus on a system, that role continued to pick up more components and pretty much was deemed unmanageable as we are seeing with looking at everything that was within it. So in January of this year, as the memo states, we did take ESL and move those services to Mrs. Black, who has overseen ELD or English Language Development since January and would like to continue to do that within her role. So the other thing that was pulled off in September is the school psychologist under the direction of Jonathan Klingeman, Heather Pringle, and Michelle Hammersley were really co-supervised, but we wanted to pull that off of that MTSS just to give a little bit of leadway going into Dr. Klingeman's departure. And Dr. Hammersley and Dr. Pringle have overseen the school psychs this year with that. So that was in September. We really pushed that over to them, but still work collaboratively with them. When we looked at the rest of the positioning, we were left with gifted and then federal programs. And within federal programs, it's about a pretty large budget that encompasses Title I funding, which is we really focus on our elementary reading, Title II, which is professional development, Title III, which is a limited amount of money really to support ELD services. And then we received Title IV, but what we have been doing is taking the Title IV and pushing it into Title II. But again, the time of the consolidated app and all of the mandates that go with federal programming, especially coming up into the next school year where we're most likely going to see even more changes, is a pretty hefty role. And it also, at the same time, really focuses on the in-between layer of interventions. So we have our Tier 1 interventions, that's the core that every student receives, and then this position, those Title I and the math interventions are the go-between to really try to catch kids or identify whether or not they need more support services through special ed. So what we are planning to do, we worked with the cabinet on a couple different meetings to really try to define what was the best moving forward to build a system, knock down silos that continue to pop up. And we would like to, our plan is to move Dr. Hammersley quick to oversee gifted. Dr. Pringle will support her, but Dr. Hammersley Quick will take the overall lead on that. A lot of the work in gifted and learning enrichment is beginning to fall under the Borough of Special Ed, even though they don't supply us funding under Chapter 16, it's local authority. There is a lot of legality. The increase in our twice exceptional students also adds a layer that it is just critical to really have a special ed lens on that position. So we would like to have Dr. Hammersley really oversee that and continue to be work on focusing on primarily the elementary, but she and Dr. Pringle really do K-12 special education and work in a team. That would bump her to a level 2 position in the Act 93 agreement moving forward. And then because we were able to take off multiple roles and we have a new person coming in that we want to be able to support, we would like to rename the former MTSS Director of Interventions and Supports to an Assistant Director of Curriculum and Academic Interventions and really house that as part of the curriculum office. That is, again, that in-between of resources for students that are following a little bit below grade level or more significantly in Tier 3. We did an overview of the position that was linked in, and that is what we plan to post most likely tomorrow so that we can post and hire for that new position.
Great. Thanks. That was really helpful, that historical context, and it certainly has seemed to evolve. And it makes sense to me that MTSS would be in curriculum as we kind of integrate those things across. Other questions from board members? Anyone? All right. Thank you. Then up next, we'll be joined by Ms. Tanya Black, Dr. Bucher, and Dr. Erica Frankenberg to give us an update on Penn State's Center for Education and Civil Rights annual report.
I could post it. Yeah, I could plug it. Do you have it? Yeah. So Eric is going to project. So actually, I should, well, and then you can just have that mic. You're going to turn it on. Thank you.
Am I on? Thanks. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you tonight to present some of the work that we've been doing as a follow-up to prior things that we've done. I think most of you have seen prior reports that we've done in the past, so I'm going to, in the interest of time, skip some of the context, except to say we're looking at a range of different indicators to try to look at equity in the school district. You certainly do a lot of analysis of some other indicators, and so what we think about doing is trying to complement the already existing work. I'm not going to present everything today, in part because student privacy concerns. Some of this data can't really be publicly discussed and released, but I will share that with the administration later. But what I've tried to do is provide an overview of some of the broad context, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end. I have tried to also address just some of the questions that came up in last year's discussion to answer some of the questions that you all had. So you may see some of the questions you asked last year, and hopefully I'll answer them. And then the last thing just to say is this is data that's been provided by you. As I've always said, I certainly would welcome working with you further on data quality issues. Analysis is only as good as the data that it analyzes. And so I would, say that it's really important to continue to strengthen this, particularly to get multiple different kinds of dimensions of equity for students within the school district. Well, okay, so I think it's first important to start off by who are the students in our school district. And we know that we are, oh, that's the second slide. Can you go back one? We know that we are a majority white school district in State College. We are disproportionately white when I compare us to the nation at large. But what we see actually is the white students who are on the far right here of the graph are the students who are declining the most rapidly. And this has been a pretty consistent trend over the last few years and is something, again, I see nationally. We see that Hispanic students had the largest increase, 23 students. Black students have also declined slightly. They're just under about 3% of the school district enrollment. Asian students have also increased during this time period, and they are the second largest group of students in the State College School District, almost 600 students. I should also say This data does not include the current school year. When we look at this by schools, going on to the next slide, we see first in elementary school we have obviously more elementary schools than middle and high. And our elementary schools in particular, I think, are really important to look at separately because our elementary schools are pretty different from one another. And you see that both in terms of size and racial composition. So all schools are majority white, but Easterly Parkway and Radio Park are the two schools that are about 40% students of color. That diversity, however, is a different kind of diversity. So at Radio Park, their diversity is driven overwhelmingly by Asian students. Over 23% of students at Radio Park are Asian. They have a growing multiracial population as well. Easterly Parkway, by contrast, has a much smaller Asian population, a higher Black percentage, higher Hispanic percentage as well. In 23-24, some of the elementary schools had no Black students. So again, when we're talking about the kinds of elementary schools we have, these are very different contexts. When we look at the change over time, again, this shows you the first chart I showed you, but at the elementary school level, you see, again, different changes overall. For example, Ferguson Township has a sharp decline in the number of students overall, including white students. That's 19 white students declining. You see, by contrast, Radio Park has had an increase in every single student group during this time period, and you see mixed patterns elsewhere. I'm going to try to breeze through this, but if you have questions, please stop me. When we look at the middle and high school, these are a little different. White student enrollment percentages are roughly similar across the schools. Obviously, the high school is much larger in size, and the high school obviously has higher numbers of some of these non-white student groups because of the large size overall. Mount Nittany Middle has the highest number of multiracial students. Park Forest, which is in part because of its feeder elementary schools, had the highest number of Asian students. Then when you look at the changes over time, again, we see a decline in the white students at the high school level, which is pretty sharp and really represents most of the change in the entire school district. And we see different patterns at the two middle schools. They're not major changes, but obviously increase in the white students at Mount Nittany while some of the other groups are declining, whereas white students at Park Forest are declining, Asian students, some other groups are increasing. So really interesting shifts in diversity there. We then go to the next slide to look at economic disadvantage. This can overlap with other forms of diversity and identity. I don't have that to show you intersectional data, although I think that data would be really important to look at. This is data that has been pulled from students' subsidized lunch programs. I will say my annual plea in a university town, this is particularly not a helpful measure, but it's the measure we have, and so that's the measure I report. One of the things I think is really noteworthy is that every school almost has had an increase in the economic disadvantage during this time, and I think that's a really important trend for us to keep an eye on, and I would ideally like to be able to have more data to show you how the trends in economic disadvantage are distributed around different indicators that I'll show you later. The most rapid rate of increase of economically disadvantaged students are the Mount Nittany Middle School, Elementary School, and Radio Park. Each of those are 4 percentage points in 1 year, which is a fairly sharp increase given the overall relatively low rates. The other thing to notice just again is obviously Easterly Parkway jumps out as a school with much higher percentages of economically disadvantaged students compared to other schools, but you see some of the other schools that are starting to rise as well. When we look at English learners has also been increasing over the last couple of years, a really steady increase, which I think is probably not surprising to many of us who live in the community. So we see in 2021, there was 161 students, and that has increased to 243 students by 23-24. When we look on the next slide at how that's distributed by schools, There's a couple of different reasons that these patterns are different based on schools. Some of it is where you provide English language support for students, and some of it is also where students live. Again, you see some divergent patterns here, just as we saw the sharp increase in economically disadvantaged students at Radio Park. You also see the pretty sharp increase in English learners at that school as well. Easterly Parkway has the highest, but it is also decreasing at the same time. And there's several schools, 3 of the elementary schools that don't have school-based EL programs, although Coral Street did come on this year.
I just wanted to double check, Erica, because I knew we had opened an ELL center at Coral Street, but that was prior to this data then, so it's still a reflection of a decrease, kind of, we think, at Easterly. Because we would move there was a small shift from some students at Easterly that went over to Coral Street.
Yeah, so this year, so for 24-25, when she does that, you'll see Coral Street go up. But what we were finding, and one of the reasons that we wanted to add an additional hub, and we had talked about even adding more this year, but again, we'll begin to look at that next year with some of the shifts, is many of our EL families want to stay at their home school. And so they're denying ESL services, which provides check-ins and support from EL, but not specific services. So that's why you can see at some schools there is like one or a few, but that's the reasoning there, is they are EL qualified, but chose to stay at their school.
Gotcha. That's helpful context. Thanks.
Maybe I'll pause for any other questions before I go on. Okay. Then the next section looks at the demographics of the adults in the school, because, of course, those are a really important influence on students, and, of course, in a number of different ways. This chart, which is so small up there, you probably can't see it, but it is in your materials, so hopefully you can look at it there. We know, again, nationally, white teachers are the majority of teachers in public school districts, and that's no exception in this school district as well. In fact, in several of the schools, there are only white teachers. There are 3 of those schools. Easterly Parkway, has had the largest number of teachers of color, even though it has a relatively small faculty. It has really had an increase and has 10% of its teachers in this last year that are teachers of color. So that's a really important achievement that school has achieved. Overall, the district had 2 additional Asian teachers compared to last year, 1 fewer Hispanic teacher, and the number of Black teachers has remained the same. Because teachers are not the only adults, although they are obviously very important adults, we also looked overall at the employee demographics that are reported by the school district. And you see here, again, we see a slight decrease in the percentage of white employees, which means an increase in the number of employees of color at the elementary school. You see the opposite pattern at the middle and the high schools. And this was perhaps my favorite chart, to try to look at how do the student demographics relate to the adult demographics. And so if you see here, this is the students of color and the adults of color. And so the blue dots, for example, for Easterly Parkway and Radio Park on the left, they represent about 40% of students of color in the blue dots. You see here how Easterly is really doing a relatively good job of trying to reflect the student demographics. It has the highest percentage of non-teaching employees of color, and it has the highest percentage of teachers of color, represented by the yellow and red dots, respectively. So this helps us to see that in one of the most diverse schools, it also has the most diverse adults. In an ideal world, of course, all schools would have diverse faculties and staff, but because of the literature about the importance of students of color seeing diverse faculty and adults in the classroom, I think it's really helpful that Easterly has done such a good job here. One of the other ways in which elementary schools in particular can help to address diversity is by hiring paraprofessionals. And a number of districts around the country do this, and then help to support those paraprofessionals into getting teacher certification and remaining as certified teachers in these schools. I'm not saying that that's what's going on in the school district, but I think it's really helpful that particularly in the last few years, there's been an increase in a number of the different schools. Again, we see an increase in Easterly Parkway and Radio Park, places that have the most diverse student bodies. And so to see the way in which there's been an increase of the paraprofessionals, again, as other adults who are helping with instructional tasks, I think it's a really positive sign for the school district. And now we transition to thinking about student outcomes. And I'm sure there are many goals in the State College Strategic Plan, but I'm sure that we could all agree that graduation, which we'll celebrate this week, is one of the most important outcomes. And so we have looked at the average graduation rates, and we chose to do a cohort. So this is a 4-year cohort that PDE has. We averaged across several different years because there are smaller non-white groups. And by combining multiple groups, we can be more assured that there's not a fluke of any one year that is sort of making these patterns, just fluky. And so what we did is we combined 4 different years, and this is a 4-year cohort graduation rate. You see overall there is a pretty strong graduation rate, but considerable gaps, particularly for Black students and Hispanic students, multiracial students in our district. Additionally, you see when we look at the graduation rates for 2 other groups, economically disadvantaged students and English learners, this is lower than the overall graduation rate, which was about 89 to 90% over these years. So economically disadvantaged is closer, still a gap to close for the English learners. One of the factors that we know relates to student achievement and ultimately educational attainment and graduation is whether kids are in the classroom. And this certainly has been an issue that has been a flashpoint across the country, including in this district after COVID. I think one of the encouraging patterns here is that you see for every group the rate of chronic absent, and this is students who are absent 10% of the days, has gone down. And so though we still see that particularly for Black and Hispanic students and also, again, multiracial students, those are much higher than other groups, we see that they're going down, and particularly Hispanic students have had a pretty sharp decline of 5.6 percentage points. So this is encouraging, and hopefully the next year of data will continue to show this progress. This looks at the chronic absentee rate, and we look at this by each school. Obviously, to the right, State College high schools nationally tend to have the highest chronic absentee rate for a lot of different reasons. So I don't think that this is particularly surprising, and it does show a pretty sharp decline this year from last year. We see different patterns at some of our elementary schools in particular. Again, Easterly Parkway, which we've already pointed out is one of the most diverse schools, does have an increase in chronic absentee rate, and so that's something to look at. It's about just under 19% in the last year that we look at. And then both middle schools have a slight increase. So some mixed patterns at the school level, and this is why school level analysis I think is really important. And obviously our elementary schools in particular serve very different student bodies. The next looks at whether these absences are excused or unexcused. And I know that there have been changes in policy, and don't ask me to tell you what your policy is, but this is using your definition of what an excused or unexcused absent is. And again, you see overall about 13% of absences were unexcused in the district. It is the highest in the middle and high schools. Seniors were the highest at 30%, while elementary school is generally under 5% in most of the grades. We next looked at issues around special education and 504 plans. As you know, a couple of years ago, the district got letters of concern about over-identification of Black students in special education. And if you see on this graph here, Black students are represented by orange. And so it is still Black and Hispanic students have a higher identification rate for special education, but this is a pretty substantial decline in just a relatively few years of time. Again, indicating that though there is still cause for concern, there has been some progress. And I think thinking about how to build on that progress is something that should be an important part of efforts moving forward. About 22% of Black and Hispanic students in the district have been identified for special education, whereas that's under 10% for Asian students. 504 plans are another way in which federal law protects for the rights of students, so all students can have access to education. In 23-24, about 6% of students in State College had 504 plans. That was 12% of high school students, and they represent the majority of students with 504 plans. Again, this is somewhat consistent with national trends. High school and middle school tend to be higher. We also know that white students and affluent districts also have higher use of 504 plans. So these are somewhat in keeping with what we see around the country.
So you just answered my exact question. I was going to whether this was typical or not, and why was it so much lower in elementary. Debbie, what did you want to ask? Did you have a question?
Yeah, 56% of our high school students have a 504.
56% of the 504 students are in high school. Yes, that's a very different way of interpreting it.
Yes, I was interpreting it much differently. Thank you. Big help. Exactly.
We next look at discipline, and I will say I think the data here are perhaps the ones that I have the least confidence in. But these are the data looking at disciplinary incidents as reported to the state on a couple of different categories. So we have in the dark blue the OSS, the out-of-school suspension, the orange, the in-school suspension. The green is expulsions, and then this latest year there were other, which are other actions. And so you see overall a slow and steady rise overall in the number of reportable disciplinary actions, and also different types of discipline that's being used. An increase 1 year in out-of-school suspension. This last year, an increase in in-school suspension. So there are a lot of different issues here to look at, and I haven't gone as in-depth as I did in prior years because of some questions about this. I did look on the next slide at discipline referrals, and this is data. I will say I think how principals think about what constitutes a discipline referral varies. So take this with the fact that this varies across schools. But overall, there were just under 1,000 referrals in 22-23. And a slightly higher percentage of students of color are being referred for discipline. This is the 23-24 data. It was from a different system, so I didn't put them on the same chart. And again, you see here, multiracial in particular is much higher percentage than it is overall. Asian students are lower, as are white students, slightly lower than what they are among the district enrollment. And then what I think is, on the next slide, the best way of looking at this is looking at the rate of each student by each racial group that is disciplined. We have groups of different sizes, and so looking at the prior charts is only so helpful. And so here you see, again, that except for Asian students, students of color are disciplined at a higher rate than white students are. Asian students are the least likely to be disciplined. And you see these for the last 2 years, some changing patterns depending on what group we're looking at. Any questions here before I transition from discipline?
Erica, how would you say that relates to national trends?
I mean, nationally, we also see Black and Hispanic students disproportionately likely to be disciplined. In the latest in early January, the Office for Civil Rights released a report looking at a range of different civil rights indicators, one of which was discipline. And we see this exact thing. They also were able to look at race and gender, and I think that's a really important thing, looking at how Black boys are being disciplined, for example, but Black girls too, and so I think trying to get it more finely grained to look at some of this is really important.
Yeah, and I don't ask because I think it's acceptable. I just ask as a way to compare, have a sense of where we fall in the realm of things. Yeah, Anne and then Angela.
I wanted to ask if this slide in particular is one site where a school level analysis would be something I really took seriously your request for data quality issues. And so is this one site where that school level analysis would be particularly useful?
Yes, and in fact, in the larger work that I will share with administration, I have done that school by school level analysis by racial group. Obviously, you're getting to really small ends, and so I think you have to take some of the rates with a grain of salt. The other measure that I like to do, this is just a discipline incident. One of the exclusionary discipline, for one reason, is harmful because they're not in the classroom. And so another rate you could look at it is what are the days that a typical student of this group is not in the classroom. And I think that's another way to sort of look at sort of the effect of exclusionary discipline.
And so sorry, my mic is always broken. So can you hear me? No. Can you hear me now? All right. So now I lost my train of thought. It's gone. It'll come back.
Okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
I thought about it like historically throughout the U.S. There's been a trend known as the model minority myth, which pits Black and Asian students against each other. Historically, it originated within World War II and then continued to evolve as the U.S. pushed different forms of propaganda. But it typically pits Asian students at the top, and this isn't really necessarily a point of privilege. It's more a point of fetishization. Yes, you get what I mean. It's more exemplary, but it doesn't negate the struggles that they face, and it pits Black students at the bottom in contrast, kind of in alignment to what typically would work within white Eurocentric standards.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I was hoping you'd mention the model minority and when I asked the question.
Sure, and I think one of the things about the Asian group in particular is it is a very big group, and particularly in a place like State College, right? We have some students who are new immigrants who are still learning the language, who are low income, and we have some Asian students who are probably the opposite on all those different dimensions. And that's true for any of these groups, but I think one of the frustrations has long been the inability to disaggregate within the Asian group, and particularly in a place like State College, where we do have that is a larger group, really trying to look at that diversity within the Asian population, I think could really help to inform the work that school level administrators are doing.
Yeah, that was one of my follow-up questions is why do we not look at socioeconomic status in comparison to discipline? As a category, yeah.
My friend spoke at Lift Every Voice, Grace Yang. She spoke about when she was taken, Miss Black took us to the racial healing luncheon, and she said that she felt out of place there because she felt like she had never really experienced racism in its stereotypical form, but she remembers instances of being uplifted because she was Asian and being pitted into this expectation of economic success and academic success because she was Asian. And I think it's definitely a interesting commentary on how we define what oppression is, because it's not always just hatred. It can be singling out, it can be fetishization, and it can be applying a stereotype to a group is racism regardless of the intent of the stereotype.
Dan?
Yeah, so a couple questions here. And the first question might be better suited for either Tanya, Danielle, or Jonathan. So I know when we're looking at the disciplinary rate by race, right? It only includes out of school suspension, in school suspension, and what was the third one again?
Expulsion.
Expulsion. Thank you. So if within our district, right? If we're going into restorative practice, or they might be losing, like say elementary school, if they're, I know we don't take recess away, right? We do not take recess, but like some other form of disciplinary action, is that tracked on our school level that would show up on a report somewhere?
And I can talk when Eric talks to our schools this summer. We're working on showing that data. We're not consistent in our elementary schools. I can't talk middle and high, but we, per se, at one school have 500 referrals or referrals that go to the office, and another school may have 100. And when they're of equal size, is somebody over-referring? Are we not referring consistently? We know we're not consistent, so we're hoping this summer to get that in front of our principals to say, what is a referral, what constitutes it, and then what do we do and how do we track that? So it's something we're working on, but with regards to total referrals that aren't the suspension, we have the code of conduct, but pending what the teacher does, teacher A may not push it forward and teacher B does, and we've got to get better at that in elementary. You can talk middle school.
Yes. You summarized it pretty well. We have some work to do. It's a little bit easier at the secondary level when you have two middle schools, Delta and the high school. So the high school is a little more consistent since they're working within a team of 4, working every single day. Yeah, it would be tracked. Some of it would be tracked, but probably not in these reports. As accountability projects is the term that we'd be using.
I mean, I'd really be interested to see some of that data, the referral data, especially from elementary, right? Because I think, Erica, in the work you do, that's where it starts. That's where it starts kids to understand what's right and what's wrong with whether it be a racially motivated incident or so on and so forth. So that's going to be really good information for people to dig into and kind of see what these numbers really are on our level, not just out-of-school suspension, in-school suspension, or expulsion. Because I think we also have moved away from a district as really trying to not do out-of-school suspension or expulsion too much. So, yeah, particularly at elementary. So that data might look a heck of a lot different if we include the referrals.
Yeah, and so the previous 2 slides were referrals, and actually we didn't have that last year, so that's something new that we've added. I'm starting to dig in and see that because research does show that there's inequality in who gets referred, and there's inequality in how those who are referred are then disciplined. So trying to look at both of them to understand ultimately the unequal outcomes.
So yes, there is a disproportionality, but the increase for all students is mainly because of the categories have increased. So there's there's more things that they're expecting us to report out on.
So the state changed.
The state changed the criteria, the standard. So
the state, any suspension now, any whatsoever, is state reportable. 2 years ago, it was the big weapons, drugs, terroristic threats that were there were specific, and now it's if you're suspended, if you're in school suspended, it's a state reportable offense.
So we have to always mark as we move forward at the data that there's a new baseline at whichever year that is. Mm-hmm. That'll be really important.
Which is great that they expanded that, right? But I think on our individual school district level, if we can track it even greater to kind of get a grasp on what's going on in our elementary schools. Sometimes you get to middle and high school, it's too late for some of these kids to learn some of to respect differences of others and that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Moving on, then we looked at AP enrollment, and I believe this data was the year before you passed the fee waiver policy. And so that's just really important to keep in mind. You had a cumulative, and there were 979 students in AP courses. The vast majority were white students. They were slightly higher than the overall proportion among state high students. Asian students also were enrolled in AP at a slightly higher rate, and then some of the other groups were enrolled at a lower rate. The AP enrollment had the undisclosed category, and so trying to make comparisons between AP enrollment and the overall enrollment is a little tricky because of that. This year, for the first time, if we go to the next slide, we are able to link whether they were enrolled in the class and then whether they took the AP test. Because, of course, you don't get college credit if you don't take and pass the test. What we see here among the students we were able to match, and there were a few of them we weren't able to match. There were, again, differential test-taking rates among those students enrolled. So obviously, Black students stand out here as a much lower rate of taking the AP test if they were enrolled. Black students were already under-enrolled in the AP courses, so there's sort of two layers of inequality here that relates to the gap for Black students in AP tests. Overall, though, we see high rates among all students, with the exception of Black students taking AP tests. I don't have this to show you multiple years because this was the first year we could compare that, but I look forward to seeing how this changes, particularly with a new test fee waiver. When you look at testing them by grade, on the left we have those who enrolled by grade, and on the right we have those who took a test. I was surprised actually that the 12th grade testing wasn't higher, but maybe they're just done. So that's obviously just a percentage that jumps out. It's much lower than the rest of the grades. But in the earlier grades in particular, very high levels of both enrollment and test taking. When we go to the next slide, we look at the percentage of those taking the AP tests by economic disadvantage. And here you see obviously a much lower rate of taking the test if you are receiving economic disadvantage than those who aren't. So a 15 percentage point gap. That's what I'm really interested in seeing what the effect of the new policy passed would be.
Yeah.
Yep.
So so I just wanted to say that I totally agree that like seeing discrepancies between the groups in terms of like who's taking the test it does raise some concerns and questions. But I also just want to say that there are a lot of reasons why people might take an AP test and not take an exam. And so like as a former math teacher, I told a lot of students who are going into engineering, don't take that calculus AP test, take college calculus. So I just, and if anyone at the board table was alarmed or shocked, I just wanted to mention that.
And I should also say there is a small number of students who take the AP test, but that year were not enrolled in an AP course. So they may have taken it a prior year, so they may just wait a year. So there are a number of different things here.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at, Jackie, is if it's your major, oftentimes even if you get a 5 in the top score, your university is not going to accept that as college credit because they want you to take their formula for the major. So I know I experienced that as a student. Angel?
Two things. First, this year, with the help of my teacher, I took the AP Lit exam without being enrolled in the course. And secondly, correct me if I'm wrong, but this year was the first year that we rolled out the AP African American History exam for this. Do you think those numbers are not counted in this, right?
That's correct.
Do you think that would affect demographics significantly?
I mean, I don't know how big the enrollment was, but I do certainly.
One class,
okay,
first
just
block,
class,
only one, and it was all seniors. I was in that course, and it was a class of 20, I think, with I believe about 15 white students and 5 black students.
That's great. Look forward to seeing how that affects these patterns.
Debbie?
Just one data comment. The fee waiver is a relatively new policy, but I think even before that, we were giving reductions in the AP. Like, weren't we giving?
We had assistance for free and reduced lunch.
free and reduced lunch students even before that.
Yes.
So
from the College Board?
No, from us.
From us.
Great.
So you might see some effect of the fee waiver, but some of it will be dampened because we were already giving some help to those students. So just
that's helpful
to keep in mind.
We offered it. We also don't know for sure how many took advantage of it.
Exactly.
And how well that was understood that it was an option. I mean, we try as best we can to advertise it and make it aware, but Which we always know with those situations, sometimes there are reasons people feel inhibited to ask for assistance.
But that's part of why I wanted to mention it, so that people know that we offer that assistance in addition to the fee waiver, because the fee waiver is only for your first
Right,
AP
and we offer
exam in your high school career.
we have assistance for any. Yeah, if they take 2 or 3, we in our free and reduced lunch, we have some programming for assistance. Peter, did you want to add something? Okay.
And then we wrap up by looking at students who are in gifted services, and there are a couple of different designations. For gifted, this is lumping all of them together, so regardless of whether they get specialized instruction or not. You see here those 4 different categories. Typically, those with a GIEP, so that's a second set. They're slightly lower than those without the GIEP. Again, this might be due to both the determination of the committee, but also what grade they're in and what they can get through regular instruction elsewhere. You see, though, a consistent pattern that there are more male students identified in each of the 4 categories, and then, of course, cumulatively more male students identified as gifted than female. When you look at economic disadvantage, and this is something I hadn't looked at in prior years, and I was a little surprised by this, as I shared with Danielle earlier today. We see a relatively low percentage of economically disadvantaged students who are identified as gifted. So around 21% of students were economically disadvantaged. 5% in elementary school were economically disadvantaged and gifted. 4% of the gifted population were economically disadvantaged, and 6.75% of high school. So I think one suggestion here would be how to think about the identification process and making sure there's extra efforts to make sure that you're identifying students who maybe didn't have the same kind of, don't present the same way as maybe students who aren't economically disadvantaged, and if there's something to the assessment, then can really take that into account. And then I conclude with,
Just real quick, when you give the presentation to the administration, does it include any demographic information on the gifted programs based on race? Because I know that it's not necessarily something that could be public because it would be easy to probably identify some people. I just want to make sure that's getting to administration, because I know we've had discussions.
It is indeed.
We've had discussions here before about how gifted program could potentially be disproportional by race in our district at times. So,
right, and so what I said about the screening and assessment was specific to economic disadvantage. That would certainly relate to other kind of categories as well. EL students, race, things like that.
Gender.
Yep.
Obviously. I mean, the chart was pretty indicative in gender differences.
So I just close with a few recommendations. I don't need to read them to you, but any last questions?
Oh, okay. Carlene?
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really detailed and complete, and so I thank you for that. In the beginning, you had mentioned something about the economic disadvantage, and you would suggest different measures that we should be looking at. Could you tell us what they are?
I love this question, Carlene. I think that typically economic disadvantage is you are either direct certified through other means assisted programs in the state, or you fill out a form and it's based on your household income. Our grad students that we give wages to at Penn State don't get really high wages, so they probably would qualify, for example, depending on their house size. That may not be the same kind of durable economic disadvantage, for example, as a family that are working minimum wage jobs, for example. And so if we can try to look at income maybe as is the federal guidelines, but maybe other factors like educational attainment of parents, things like that might help us understand the full picture of resources available to children as they've been growing up. That is typically what I think can be really useful in university towns like this. And I also think Some of the best research on free and reduced lunch as a measure suggests that about 20% are inaccurately categorized, in part, particularly now probably due to some of the federal actions. Some students who are immigrants, even legal documented immigrants, may be fearful of filling out the forms, for example, or not getting the means, don't access the governmental programs they're eligible for. So I think there are a lot of different ways in which it's a helpful measure, but it's an estimate, I think, at best. And I'm happy to share any recommendations or further reading with anyone on the board if they're interested.
Yeah. The challenge we face, though, a little bit is knowing when we request information, as some of the metrics you mentioned, we don't know if we're getting it from everybody. So again, we still get stuck in that estimating, and we can't compel people to tell us their household incomes, unfortunately. But I agree with you. I wish we had a much better measure.
And I
oh, you had another one, sure.
Yes, another question is the Delta program, and I'm glad that you had the asterisks when you had included it in one of the. But next year, hopefully, we'll be able to get Delta information for the school.
Yes, it is. It is uneven.
Will be one more year past that. Yeah.
Because it's a program
They're
this
just,
year.
It's just starting next year, so it'll have to finish that year before we have that data.
But
So
if you look closely, Delta is in some of my charts, but
Yes,
not all of
I
them.
did see that, and I was thankful for that.
So I think that's just one of the things related to the data systems. Some of them track by the building level, and some of them look at the school as is reported to the state. And so certainly consistency across those could make it easier to pull even and not wait until Delta is its own separate school.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Anne? Yeah. Well, Anne, and then we'll get to you, Angel.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So thank you so much, because this provides invaluable information for us to ask smarter questions, because we are fully committed to equity. So these kinds of reports are super helpful. I just in terms of my own understanding, it was so helpful when you specified the kind of data issues, the quality issues in terms of different schools. Can you give one example of, in the equity finding number 2, different supports and plans to ensure students might be needed? And then in finding 6, different assessments and supports. Could you give one example of each and what that would look like operationalized? Oh, in the report, it's by executive report. So for
I have it.
Yeah. Just so we could have an example of what that would look like in operation. Does that make sense?
Can you tell me which numbers those were again?
Finding 3, many of our analyses not reported here due to concerns, may indicate need for different supports or different plans to ensure students get their needs. So what would that look like operationally? Just one brief example.
I think, for example, if the identification of students for special education or discipline are very disproportionate at a certain school, then that might mean additional analysis or discussions with the school staff and school leader. Why are we seeing these proportions? Why are they different? So those are the kinds of things that I meant there.
Great. And then the second one is with finding 6, further assessments and support is needed to understand student experiences. Are you talking about something like focus groups, or what would that look like that would get the kind of answers or data you think would be helpful for us?
Yes, I mean, I think quantitative data is lovely, and that's what I used here. But it's also limited in what you can really tell, and so there are even a lot of things here that more quantitative data could have gotten at. Students with 504 plans we know actually very little about, and I think because of a question you asked last year, Amy, I included that this year. Multilingual students. Are they exiting ELD programs? What about students who had been in those programs and are no longer? What are their experiences? Are they enrolling in AP courses, for example? So I think, even some of these categories, you may transition out of, but to really understand the benefit of the experiences that supports, are these students just merely out of it, or are they flourishing the same way that all students are?
Super helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, Angel, quickly.
Yeah, I was going to ask, on one graph, it said that you pulled data from the Delta Middle School, but not the high school. Is there a reason for that? I believe it was a 504 plan graph.
I think it was what was provided to me.
Okay. That's probably because a lot of Delta students are enrolled in the high school.
Yeah.
Over here. Any other questions? So I don't have any more questions. I asked them as we went, but I do have one comment, and I do, in looking through the data you provided, I'm pretty struck and concerned, and I've voiced this in the past, that we need to be more closely looking at gender.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons, and the intersectionality of gender with different groups. I think it's really important that we're looking at it because it plays roles in discipline and a variety of other structures, and we know that there are outcomes societally that are tied to those things. Violence against women is escalating in our country and in the world. There is increasing radicalization of individuals online, and this is something we as a school district have to start preparing for, and we have to start talking about how our SEL efforts can address those. So recently, just in the past couple weeks, I think in the last month, in the UK, they have instituted programming that they're supporting their schools in SEL in terms of regards to gender-related issues, gender violence, misogyny in the manosphere. And I think these are burgeoning and growing problems in our country that we need to be prepared to address. So that's just a comment I wanted to make about that. It's something that relates to both our curriculum and our SEL and a variety of other structures, and we have a unique opportunity to address it. Peter.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that too, because the role of artificial intelligence in the manipulation of people by gender is also going to inflame things that can also drive other disciplinary problems. So I think that just as a kind of that's even more global. I know Jackie and I frequently exchange things about AI. She has, I think, quite a bit of thoughtfulness about this, but I think that AI's ability to wreak havoc on anything, including everything that we're looking at here, we have to be thinking about an awful lot more.
And just to say, one of the things that we had talked about a few years ago is looking at the school climate survey, which could certainly get at the gender issues, I think also LGBT status, things like that. And so that's also one of the things that looking at student experiences, if you're already collecting the data, using that to help understand better some of these things that you're mentioning, I think it's there and can help inform what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's important to track and to see where we're having problems, but I think there's certainly evidence that there are certain issues that are issues regardless that we need to educate our students about.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that was a very intense and thorough presentation. We really appreciate all the work that you and your team have done, Dr. Frankenberg, and also all the administrators that have helped pull the data together and try and get all the bits and pieces for you to make it meaningful. And so I just am thankful to everybody. This is some of the most important work we do, in my opinion. Okay, thanks so much. Have a good evening, Dr. Frankenberg. And I think if board members are okay for a little longer, we'll try to get through the Suicide Prevention and Intervention Action Plan. Dr. Bucher and Ms. Beaver are going to provide us with an overview of that, and that's based on the recommendations of Dr. Terry Erbacher's 2024-2025 external review of our policies and procedures related to suicide prevention, screening and assessment, intervention, and postvention. I'd like to also just make a note that the action plan has been developed in collaboration with Jean Knaus as part of JK Restorative Practices Training and Consulting, LLC. Jean was a former member of our district.
Yeah. Good evening. Hopefully this microphone's going to work tonight. So I did a prepare a presentation, but just really want to kind of go over the memo that is presented to the board, as well as the action plan. As Dr. Bader had said, this report or action plan was developed by Jen Canals in response to the report provided from Dr. Terry Erbucker. So just to kind of give an overview, it is a framework developed to ensure accountability, collaboration of all stakeholders that are involved in ensuring that resources are allocated effectively. We've established clear timelines for completion, and we have ongoing progress to check in to make sure that we're following that report and action plan. You will see from the report is organized into sections that include recommendations from Dr. Erbucker's report, current standard SCASD standard operating procedures, the person or persons responsible and resources needed, the timeline for completion, progress notes, and completion date. As you know, the report from Dr. Erbucker was presented to the board in March, but we've been working on recommendations throughout the school year, and I just want to kind of give you a highlight on some of the progress and things that we've been doing. So within the area of building a climate of compassion and trust, in October, the high school My Mental Health Matters Club participated in the Out of the Darkness Walk at Penn State's campus, and that's something that we'll continue to participate going forward. Cartwheel teletherapy services were added as an additional resource for students, as well as an employee assistance program with HR. We have also continued and will continue collaboration with district and community partners, and those include the Jana Marie Foundation, TIDES, Penn State Her Clinic, Penn State Psych Clinic, and Dr. Peter Montmany. In the area of improving communications, we've added the Mindfulness Connection newsletter that highlights our student services program, but all the supports that we're providing within the district, as well as providing resources to families that connect them to community resources. These resources include crisis support, 988 Lifeline, and Safe to Says. In the area of suicide intervention and prevention training, we are continuing to explore flight team training. I attended flight training in April. There will be another training in September that will be offered to all mental health providers within the district that were not available to attend training or just need a refresher course because it's been a while since we look at it. The high school hosted, again, their 2 mental health summits. We've also expanded that down to the middle school. So if you haven't seen the May newsletter, we Park Forest and Mount Nittany both hosted mental health summits for their students this year, and we'll continue that next year. Document revisions. One of the recommendations from the report is having a common document for safe rooms during a traumatic event. We have revised that form, and that was implemented in the April safety concern at the high school. So when we provided support in mental health safe rooms for students that need, we utilized that form. Policy updates this year included Policy 719, which is the memorial policy, and Policy 819, Suicide Awareness, Prevention, Response, which was presented to the committee on May 20th. Additionally, there was review of programming that has led to the following recommendations, and that includes Character Strong, which we discussed at the May board meeting, providing Tier 1 SEL K through 8, as well as expanding our K2 solutions, which is intervention supports for students, and Tier 3 intervention supports specifically for special education students. Additionally, which is the second memo I'll have tonight, is a recommendation to support mental health programming within the district, and to partner again with UPMC and expand what we have already established as HEARTS, as the partial hospitalization, but also to providing mental health supports for secondary students at the middle and high school level in an intensive outpatient programming. So all that to say, there's a lot of work that we have done, but there's a lot of work that we continue to do and continue to make progress. And so it's not just one person, it's all of us working together as a whole to make sure that we have a comprehensive approach to meeting all the recommendations within the report and having a timeline for completion. So our goal is to continue to work through those, continue to do the things we've established this year, and then provide an update to the board. Any questions?
Thanks, Stephanie. That's really complete. I think the way that it was presented was really helpful to have all those different sections of what's ongoing, what the planned next tackle point is, and completion. So I really appreciate that. Questions?
Yes. More of just a conversation piece. I don't know how to say this. I'm looking at the building climate of compassion and trust, which I think was, for a lot of people, the biggest part of that report, and probably the one where we needed to do the most work. I do think some of that came down to not just SCASD, but also the board. I think there was a breach of trust there as well, in the community within the board. So I think there are probably more things we could add here. One thing that I was a little concerned about is this helpful hints and reminders checklist, which I'm not saying that the things that are on this list aren't useful. I'm saying putting it in a checklist like this where it says completed has a bit of a student dies by suicide or there's a traumatic event, and that is an ongoing thing. It isn't as if we check all the boxes and then we're done. And I think that was part of the breach of trust that we had with that particular family and within the public. So I don't necessarily think that the recommendations themselves are wrong, but I think we need to look at it as an ongoing process instead of a thing that you can complete.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think any of these are recommendations are pulled from report, and whatever is implemented, we should always be, following up and, developing and thinking through, like, what are things that we're doing well, what are things we're not doing well. Just for example, within our own the April safety concern at the high school, part of that was a debrief to say, hey, what worked, what didn't work, and that's working together with all teams. And so I understand what you're saying in checklists. It feels like insensitive in some ways.
Well, and I think that was the interpretation that a lot of people had, was that we had, meetings set up with the family. We had meetings, we checked in with the people for 2 days at the school, checked that box, and then to kind of move on. And I think that's where that breach of trust happens. So I would like to see us, I don't know, maybe use language or use forms that indicate that it is an ongoing thing, right? Even if one of the things on the checklist is continue to check in, which I think we didn't do particularly well after the fact. I think within the first week, right, and the first couple of weeks it went really well. It was really after the fact that I think people started to get a little, and this was where we got that kind of community feedback that we needed more. And again, I think if we just put it in the framework of a checklist, it almost functions the same way, at least in people's mind. I'm not saying that's how we'll, my hope is that we never need it again, frankly. I hope that this is all work that we don't have to come back to, but unfortunately, I suspect someday we will. I did have just a question about the decision, and maybe I missed it somewhere in meetings and discussions. Maybe you can clarify what went into the decision to use JK Restorative Practices consultant to put this together? Because did we discuss that as a board? Or was that an administrative choice?
That was an administrative choice.
Okay.
We have contracted to JK.
Okay.
And we have used her resources because we have the hours available. So we already had her at our disposal to help us in the various different mental health aspects of.
Okay.
So.
I see.
And I mean, she collated the whole plan, but that doesn't mean she made. I mean, there was a collaborative effort with everybody within the district in terms of, those responses. I would understand. Is my understanding.
Yeah, yes. She definitely met with different groups that are part of this plan. So you can see even the timeline. It's not just student services. It's administrative. It's coordination of safety, IT services. So there's a lot of people that were involved in that development.
It was also the direction of the board to come up with a list of things directed by the report of things when they've been completed, when we're going to be ongoing, and those type of things. That was the direction of the board. So that's why it's in this type of form.
Okay.
Dan?
Item number 14, the flight training. Are we going to limit what staff can get that take the flight training, or like how big is the flight team now? I can't remember. Do you know off the top of your head?
It started with all administrators, mental health workers, and it was done over the summer. Obviously, over the years, administrators have, retired, and we need to continually to get those people trained. So that's what Stephanie is working on.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we were just keeping it with administrators or if we were giving staff the opportunity to do that training as well. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not trained in it, right? I don't know if the more people, the better, right? To fill gaps or somebody thinks so on and so forth. I don't know what curious that plan.
So the purpose of the flight team is for if another district would need assistance, and mainly they need mental health workers, nurses, mental counselors, administrators. They would go as a team to assist another district in whatever their crisis is. And they would do the same for us. So all the surrounding districts here have been flight team trained and have a team, including the IU, that could come and assist wherever needed.
So it just makes, okay, then so as new administrators come on, we just make sure they continually get trained, and that's, thank you. I was just trying to understand that a little bit.
I'm sticking my hand up because it's organized through the IU10, and like there's just kind of a rolling training so that at any point any IU10 school can call on the flight team to come help.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's a critter on the roof. Anybody else on this side of the table? Debbie or Peter?
I'm very distracted by the
Cheeping.
By the tweet.
The cheeping.
Yeah, by either someone's cell phone or whatever that is.
It's something on the roof. Carlene, did you have a question? Okay. Ann?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Not yet.
She says yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I wanted to thank you and the collective team and just mention that policy 719 that is referenced in the document should be going as an information item to board action on the 16th. And we just on May 20th in policy looked at 819, a pretty major revision of suicide awareness, prevention, and response. That policy, and that will, I also believe, be moving forward to as a discussion item on June 16th. And I appreciated that you started off the framing of talking about this action plan in terms of accountability and collaboration. Because I think in policy, as we were all working together, there was a real spirit of collaboration. And, one of the key points that Dr. Erbacher mentioned was, for example, the difference between screening and assessment. And I appreciate your patience as you kind of instructed someone who doesn't know much about that so I could fully understand. And so I think, again, I appreciate your attention to accountability and collaboration. And my sense of in policy is that there is a full commitment to kind of continually revisit this again and again so that everyone's taken care of to the best of our ability. So I just want to thank you and the whole team for all your efforts on this. As the person in policy, I saw it firsthand, and I'm really grateful.
Thanks, Ann. Others? The one thing I wanted to highlight was I really appreciate that we're going to be considering having a few people trained in the National Association, the Prepare model as well, so we can kind of supplement what the flight process offers, and it seems like they will be a nice match together. I know Dr. Erbacher talked about that, so I'm excited to learn what that might be, how that might be different. Anything else?
Yeah, I just have one other kind of question or point to make, sort of going back to that ongoing nature of a crisis. I I think this is a great start. I think this is great revisions and additions here and there. I would like to see us maybe have a little more of a plan in place for adding staffing. I understand we do this annually, so it's part of our process, but I think we heard from our counselors that they need more help. And I want to acknowledge that we heard that from them, and they're right. The other thing I wanted to point out is that it's a little difficult to read, but that's just because there are several different levels of people offering support. Can you explain, like, who takes point on collaborating with families who have experienced this? Because it's great for us to have like an action plan going forward, but I think if we could apply this retroactively and make sure that I think that's part of the healing process, like who within the district coordinates with the family, one family in particular, to make sure that we recognize that that student's passing or whatever sort of memorializing that we want to do.
Yeah, I think relationships are really important. And I think sometimes, who families have relationships and, working with that family to make sure that that's communicated with the team and everything. We've really established that with our group. We have some individuals on our flight team that have really worked.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Have really worked extensively with all of our families, and their connection to our families and the trust that our families have in them is invaluable to our district. And I feel that's really important moving forward to continue building upon those connections.
So part of the checklist process is really to identify who are the people closest to this group and who can kind of take point in making sure. I think it's a good idea. I just wanted to be sure that we're also carrying that through into, families who are experiencing that. So.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. This is really helpful to follow up and circle back to. I think we'll try to wrap up CCL before we take a brief recess. So we can move on to the UPMC intensive outpatient counseling. Yeah. I know that's you too.
Yeah, so this one is really just, it's piggybacking on the recommendations from Dr. Erbacher's report in regards to providing continuum of intensive mental health supports. But what we have seen across this year is that we have a PHP program in elementary schools, but we have a gap in services at secondary level. And so how can we provide those intensive supports? And one of the things that even came out in community conversations that we had held in March at the State Theater was, there's a lack of resources within the area in regards to partial or those more intensive outpatient services. So this memo is really to kind of outline the need for an intensive outpatient program here within State College for our students in middle school and high school, so serving students 6 through 12. It would be in partnership with UPMC, who already has licensure on our campuses, but also operate the HEARTS program, so they know what those behavioral supports need to happen. It is to provide the different from the partial hospitalization is that students would be in their home-based schools and regularly attend classes, but then have the flexibility to attend intensive counseling supports as needed or whatever in their program and plan. The intent is to be short term, so 6 to 8 weeks, and then hopefully to kind of transition them back to full-time schooling as needed. So are there any questions in regards to IOP?
Go ahead.
So is this something, one of the words people use when we talk about these things is reentry. So like this is something that might function for students who are trying to come back to being full-time students.
It is one of the things that we have definitely discussed is that students who are in partial, it's, in partial one day and then they're back in the school setting. And that's a hard transition for any students to have been in a crisis or a traumatic event. And so one of the things that we discussed with IOP is how can we provide a transition service for those students. So yes, that would be one of those considerations with this.
All right, I know that's something that's been really needed in the community across the state and across the country. People are talking about that as well. So it's great. Thank you for helping get that together.
Go ahead, Anne.
As not fully with my whole heart in support of this, but I did wonder, based on the HEARTS program, do we have any sense of what the district costs may be? In the memo, it says the costs of the programs are estimated at $139,000. However, participants' private insurance will be billed prior to the district incurring costs. So do we have any sense, or is it really just not equivalent? And again, I fully support this. This is such a need. I just am trying to kind of wrap my mind around it in a planning stage.
Yeah, because we contract with UPMC, UPMC's with their licensure can bill insurance for services provided by UPMC. So while that's an estimated cost that Randy Brown has worked out with UPMC, that could vary depending on insurance and what they will kind of reimburse for those services. Yep.
So to follow up on that, then are we only going to be able to admit students who have insurance coverage? How are we going to address those situations?
That's where the fee comes in.
Okay.
If the insurance is able to pay, then it's no fee. We built in a contingency basically so that
to pick up the stopgap.
Pick up the stop.
Okay, I mean that was my assumption, but I wanted to make sure we were clear on verbally saying that.
Case management that would be involved in this would help to assist, making sure students and families have access. So we have a lot of community agency providers that can help support application processes for Medicaid or CHIP services or anything like that.
That's helpful. So I had a logistical question though as well. So you said stuff about them being at their home base. So what % of their day would they spend in the IOP, and how would they manage lost time in the classroom? Because like the way we do HEARTS, we have an instructor that partners with the whole program, and so they have teachers in the classroom. So I'm just trying to better understand. I'm not sure I'm picturing how it would work.
Yeah, so approximately 50%, and we're looking to utilize our virtual program if needed. Resources, obviously want to get students the support they need so they can make those transitions. So floating the students an AM session depending on the grade level and a PM session for another grade levels at the secondary.
So, but we talked about like six week as a.
It's designed to be short term. The other things that we've discussed with depending on, so it is going to be based on students' plan. So depending on how much group or individual therapy, there also could be potential flexibility where the therapist could go to provide services at the home school. So, we're working with that, but it really kind of depends on what the need and how things are structured out with that.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand because we try when we move kids to virtual, they're in virtual for like an entire semester. So just trying to think of how that's going to integrate depending on their course load and what courses they're taking. So if they're largely in the CTC program, then that gets tricky. So I'm sure I know you're already thinking through it all, but like I'm thinking
basically
that it's pretty complicated.
prioritizing which courses they would do in person.
Gotcha.
And supplementing if needed, and what credits at the high school level do they need at that particular time. I think maybe putting this first and then education, classwork.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. Totally. But when they come back, I don't want them to feel behind and wanted to understand how that part keeps track. Yeah. Aaron?
Just looking at this training piece and hearing you talk about trainings for teachers and for counselors, all good stuff. What I don't see on here and what I think would be really interesting is to look for the kinds of trainings that upper administration can have for themselves about how to handle those kinds of crisis situations, and I think be involved in many of these same kinds of trainings. But I think, trainings about how to work with people who are in crisis, for instance. Like, you don't have to be a counselor to be able to do that, but how to express empathy, how to work with somebody who's dealing with that. And I think,
Erin, I'm confused. What trainings are you talking about in regard to the intensive outpatient counseling?
sorry, I'm looking at the recommendation for suicide intervention and prevention training.
Is that from the previous?
The
Oh.
previous memo. It's okay, but
I must be looking at a different thing. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Okay, I just was a little bit uncertain because I know the counselors that are part of the outpatient program will be counselors primarily from UPMC. There will be their
Oh, yeah,
specialty
sorry. I think I
counselors.
jumped off from what you guys were talking about. So
That's okay. All right. Yeah. Debbie and Peter?
Thank you for the presentation, and some of my questions have already been answered, in particular Ann's question and the clarifications about the cost and how that would be handled. I guess I have two questions. One is capacity of the provider. Do they have the capacity to meet the expected needs? If the needs are greater, like how would we ration access to this service?
So there would be a referral process, and we would work with UPMC to develop that referral process. So students are admitted into that program and their progress monitored in regards to ensuring that they're meeting the needs of the program, and we're meeting the needs to support them from the program and in the school setting. Are you thinking like census capacity?
I'm just thinking, I mean, this is not my area of expertise, but I attended the mental health summit that we had at the State Theater, and a big part of the conversation was about the insufficient resources we have as a community to address youth mental health concerns. So this would be one stopgap measure, right? As Jackie said, one way that we can help with the transition, maybe from an inpatient into back to school. So if we find that we have too many students that need this and we can't accommodate them all in the program, like what do we do, right? Is it limited with the number of students that we can take? So for example, Hearts, right, we had one classroom and we've recently expanded it to have 2 classrooms. So do we think that whatever this partnership and the counselors that they have available, do they have the staff
to
meet the needs?
So right now, yes. So we're basing it off of just some kind of preliminary statistics coming out of school-based mental health and the number of referrals that we have. So we're looking at the intensive needs. It's not a partial hospitalization. So if a student needs a more residential program or treatment, they're going to be able to refer out for that. But it's really to have students stay in school and also meet their mental health and wellness, and look at that. So right now they do have the staffing to support the program, and I guess that's part of this. It is new, so it's ongoing to kind of revisit and to see how many students are being recommended, what is the true need, and then to kind of come back and say, okay, we're meeting a need, or we're completely overwhelmed and we need more. So with it being new, previously the district had STRIDES, which was the secondary partial hospitalization. So things are different sometimes at the secondary level.
Great. And then my second question, just related to that, is I do want to emphasize for the community, I am in support of this as a short-term, addressing a short-term need. And if there are longer-term needs, we do need to develop and cultivate these partnerships with the community, because I do have concerns that there will be unrealistic expectations that the school is going to meet all of the mental health needs of our students, and we can't. That's not who we are. That's not our primary focus. So I like this idea as a short-term meeting of needs. But if we come back and say, oh, there's a need for longer term, that's going to be a much harder sell because it's going to be more expensive and it's not our area of expertise. And so I just want to emphasize again that the provision of mental health benefits and addressing the needs of mental health concerns has got to be a partnership with our families and with the community and cannot be placed solely upon the school. And I know you know that, but that's mostly for the public. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Can you say anything about, in the last 5 to 10 years, about the number of children who are impacted by like mental health issues and the severity of those mental health issues?
Only having been here a year, I can tell you in regards to the data from our school-based mental health referrals and connecting to providers internally this year. So, we process almost, 100 cases of referrals that go to her clinic interns, mental health counselors, and that's just like a year's worth of data here. That doesn't, we're not keeping track or collecting data on the number of students that go to partial hospitalizations throughout the school year. That's, private. Families may share, families might not share that information with us. And then, our heart census has been, 12 to 15 students. So if you look at our partial hospitalization and our students that are being served through that behavioral benefit, that's some, but we can definitely collect and gather some more information for that.
I mean, my hunch is that our district is not so different from the nation at large overall, and that we've seen an almost doubling in rates of depression, anxiety, suicidality in the last decade plus. And I would imagine that each of us and our families, our friends, that we see this at play in our kids' lives, especially in the wake of COVID, with elevated levels of isolation. I think one of the things that I'm really wondering about has to go back to this cost and what some other board members have said about any of the expectation of what the school does in response. I'm wondering if we have a doubling or tripling of people who have been on Medicaid, what that is going to do should the one big beautiful bill go through, what those Medicaid cuts would do for our share of the cost of this program. And I don't know that you can answer that question, but if we have, thinking back to a couple of presentations ago, where we have something like, where we have 20-ish%.
Growing.
Right, and growing, and elevated levels of poverty, less access to health insurance, that the school may be expected to take on a financial burden for families. And I'm not saying that the district shouldn't, but I'm thinking that if we have fewer people on health insurance because Congress throws them off of their health insurance, and there's an expectation that we take care of kids, and this area has a high level of that, then that changes the conversation. It changes the monetary cost to the taxpayer. And I think we all need to think about what the multiple levels of government are saying we're responsible for. Because if the federal government, if the Congress says, actually, we're not responsible for your kids' health care, then who is? It's just an open question. It's a rhetorical question you don't have to answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could be looking at 800,000 people in Pennsylvania without health care. And that breaks my heart. That's all.
Yeah, I think it's an important program to pilot. I think, like anything we engage in, sometimes there's a lot of unknowns and things that we have to consider could change over time. And so these are all important points. I think, we know there's a lot of social determinants to health, and some of those play into equity and a variety of other factors. And as we're facing increasing challenges for some of those populations in our community, those are going to amplify one another. So students who are in socioeconomic difficulties that then also lose health care are actually going to be more prone to then have mental health challenges due to the stressors on their family. So there's a snowballing effect that we have to be paying attention to and prepare for. And there will sometimes be situations where we'll have to limit resources because we are on a finite budget and we're relying on taxpayer dollars, and there's a large number of things that are left to schools to address that other organizational government entities don't want to or cannot manage to work together to do. So you wanted to add something, Curtis?
Yeah, so I just wanted to give you, after only being here a year, just kudos and thank yous for all the hard work and the partnerships that you have formed with these organizations to bring something forward to us to help our students as far as mental health. So I appreciate all the work you have done. So.
Yeah, I know you've talked a little bit about this possibility off and on for a while, and since you've arrived, you've just really embraced it and hit the ground running. So I really appreciate that commitment. Any last questions on this item? All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. We're adjourned. We're in recess.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
All right, I'm going to reconvene the June 2nd, 2025 State College Area School District Board of Directors meeting. We're going to move on to facilities and grounds. We have Mike Fisher here tonight to share Mount Nittany Elementary Project update.
Quick update. This is a nice picture of the geothermal well field that used to be stone until all the rain and the sludge that was brought up, but all the wells are in. So it's looking good. We're starting a lot of tie-ins to the existing building, what we can do while kids are still there. So really, right now, our foundations are all complete. So these are all the footers that would go in, kind of around the entire site. Wells are complete. A lot of the sanitary tie-ins underground are done. Retaining wall work has begun, and then the stormwater basins and the piping. There's a very large catchment basin like we're putting in at Park Forest Middle. We've been talking about sort of the same design, same type of catchment basin. That's complete as well. So somehow we've managed to stay on schedule with 2 months of rain. So for the next steps here, will be what the concrete slab for the building is right now scheduled for June 12th. Next week, we'll actually be getting into the school, so the actual tie-in to the facade and the music and art room, as well as there's some remodeling to do over in the nurses' suite. So that's going to start working with my cleaning staff over the summer. So it'll start next week. And then right now, we're reviewing a lot of the samples that are coming in. We're trying to match brick that was made 15 years ago, as close as possible, and just like curtain colors and that kind of stuff. So we're working with the staff at the school to help us out with that. I'm not an interior designer, so. And then underground utilities are moving right along. So far so good, especially like I said with the weather we've had.
Great.
Questions?
Jackie, did you have a question? Oh, just a thumbs up, big thumbs up. Yeah, that's remarkable progress with the amount of rain we've had. Debbie?
I just wanted to say thanks. And also when we toured Mount Nittany L, the kids were super excited. And they were very excited to show us the door where they could see the geothermals and talk about it. And they were very excited.
Yeah, that was their favorite part to share. And their excitement for what it'll be next year.
They liked the large equipment that was there. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, elementary school kids, big equipment, yeah. Pretty common. Okay. Anything else? All right, thanks very much, Mike. Thanks for your patience to
for this long evening. So that concludes the committee of the whole portion of the meeting. We now have an additional time for public comment. Again, this is public comment that's not related to consent or action items on the agenda. Do we have anyone joining remotely? We'll start there that is here to make a public comment. Okay, anyone in person?
Jennifer Black, Half Moon Township. So first off, I wanted to say that I think the extensive action plan has a lot of amazing things in it that are really going to help our kids for suicide prevention. I couldn't help but feel like the elephant in the room as we talked about maybe, you know, we should ask the family what they think. Like, hi, I'm right here. No one ever asks us what we think. No one, and when I say no one, not no one, but for the most part, people kind of just keep their distance and hope for the best, or I don't know, I don't understand. So what I'm saying is I have always been an open book about our mental health struggles in our family and things that we've gone through. And so many other families that I've connected with are struggling in the same way. And we find so much comfort in talking, you know, with each other and figuring things out. And that's how you make the big changes. You talk to the people who are in the trenches and who are going through this. And we can tell you what works and what doesn't work. Now, we don't, obviously, you're not going to take everything that we say, but I mean, not only do we then feel heard as a community, but our students can improve and things can get better because we're learning from experience. I think that the intensive outpatient program is absolutely necessary. I think that is amazing. I think that has to happen. I also think that no one that I've spoken to believes that it is the sole responsibility of the school district to provide mental health services for children. I know I certainly don't. Communication is what I expect. And the the intensive outpatient program is absolutely a wonderful way to transition a child from inpatient back into the school setting. That's what it is. So I just want you all to, I know because of insurance and all of that, the amount of money might be something that might cause you to think twice. I implore you to not think twice, to reach out to those families whose children have been inpatient and are struggling, and they will tell you this is 100% needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in person or online? Okay. Then we're going to move on to our consent agenda. This includes several items that we will address in a single motion for approval, but we'll go through each category one by one. Any adjustments to the minutes? Yeah, Jackie.
Just a small typo. On the 5/19/2025 regular meeting minutes, the ECCA ECHO was recorded as ECHO ECHO. So just a small little change there.
So, all right, great. We can make that adjustment. Next up, we want to just call attention to there are some changes in our September and October 2025 board meeting dates. So that's included for our approval tonight. We needed to make some adjustments due to PSBA's conference, I think, and some holidays. So we're shifting some dates there. Operations, we've got some agreements with the Central Intermediate Unit for special ed and transportation, some additional consulting work, as well as a med transport kit for our latest purchase for the athletics department, the the vehicle we purchased for them a couple meetings ago. Any changes or questions in this section? Okay. The last section is instructional programs. We've got a language screener and the new textbooks that we were presented last meeting. No? All right. Then I'd like to call for a motion to approve the consent agenda items 9 through 12 with the corrections to the minutes as noted.
Huff so moved.
Colby, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any last questions or discussion? Any public comment on the consent agenda? All right, board members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda has passed. We're going to move on to action items. Agenda item 13A is a motion to accept the resignation of Mr. Dan Colby, board member of the State College Area School Board, effective June 18th at 8 a.m. This is shown in attachment 13A. If I have a motion, then I'll give Dan an opportunity. Once I have a motion.
So moved.
All right, reluctantly.
Huff second, also reluctantly.
All right. Dan, did you want to read it or anything you wanted to say before we move to accept it?
Yeah, sure. Just real quick, I want to thank the board. I know it's been a short time, and I wish I could stay here a little bit longer, but unfortunately, my family and I have to move for work purposes. I'll miss you all, and I thank you for the time on the board, and thank you for the great community for always keeping us on our toes. And look forward to. I'm going to keep watching, keep hearing what's going on.
All right. So on behalf of the board, Dan, I'd like to thank you for your contributions and your time with us. I know you and your family are looking forward to this next chapter, and we certainly wish you well. Information about the process for filling Dan's vacant seat will be shared within the next day or two through the district communications. We encourage the public to stay tuned for that announcement and appreciate your attention to this important matter. And with that, I have to ask any questions or discussion from board members. Any public comment on this action item? All right, board members, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Reluctantly, aye. Any opposed? Well, yeah, sadly that item is passed, so we've accepted that letter. Agenda item 13B is a motion to approve the 2025 PSBA legislative platform voting delegates. Right now, that will include Jackie Huff and Carlene Crevecoeur. We do have one additional spot. If someone changes their mind and would like to attend, we can still approve that in time for submission. But right now, tonight, we're approving those two individuals to attend in this capacity on October 21st. Oh, yeah, haha, you won't be here.
It
Do I have a
really
motion?
is, Huff so moved. It really can be a party, especially if you're sitting next to me.
Okay.
I said I was willing to do it if no one else wanted to do it.
Okay.
So if everyone else is saying no, then you can just put me in.
All right, so we're going to add Deborah Anderson as well to this motion without objection. We'll add that, and then we'll have our 3 delegates. Excellent. Any questions or public comment on this item? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much for your service, board members. It's much appreciated. That item is passed. Agenda item 13C is a motion to approve 2025 PSBA legislative platform proposal. This is shown in attachment 13C. Do I have a
Huff
motion?
so moved.
Colby, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. So this is the same, roughly the same platform suggestion that Jackie made last year, and we had a robust discussion about it at that time. So just for the general public, we're all very familiar with this item, so we may have not much to say, although I'm opening the floor for questions or discussion.
So I'll just very briefly summarize that this is the proposed addition is to encourage the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the legislature writ large to continue grading any written responses from a student that are collected as part of a standardized test in the state of Pennsylvania to be graded and scored by a human scorer. There's been a large push over the past 8 to 9 to 10 years where many states in the United States have moved to algorithmic scoring of written assessments. And I personally hold that this is pretty dehumanizing. Like, I don't want ask my kids to write something that will be scored by not a human.
Right.
And so this is just, like a somewhat symbolic addition to the platform, just to kind of stake ground and say, we really value, like if we think it's important enough to ask a student to write a response to a question, then it should be important enough for someone to read that response and assess the quality of it instead of just having it go through an algorithm.
Thanks. I concur. Other questions or discussion on this item? Do you have any public comment? All right, board members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that item is passed. We'll put that forward to PSBA. Thanks, Jackie. Agenda item 13D is a motion to approve the adoption of the 2025-2026 final budget. This is shown in attachment 13D.
Anderson, so moved.
House second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Joe, is there anything you want to add? So we've kind of discussed the budget ad infinitum up to this point. This is just a culminating moment of passing the final budget. There's been no changes since our last discussion. Any questions from board members for Joe? All right. Any public comment on what?
I just wanted to say thanks for everyone's patience. I know we've been talking about it since December and before, so thanks for all being willing participants in the discussion.
Yeah, I have a little comment ready for then, but you beat me to it a little bit. Did I already ask any public comment on the final budget? We did have the budget hearing last meeting, so that box has been checked. Okay. Board members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. That item is passed. I do want to thank Randy and the entire financial team for their diligent work in preparing the budget. Your attention to detail, long hours, and thoughtful planning ensure that we're being responsible stewards of our resources while continuing to support the needs of our students and staff. We appreciate your commitment to transparency and fiscal responsibility and the way that you partner with us as a board to help us through this process and make these critical decisions. It's one of the most important jobs we have. So thank you. Agenda item 13E is a motion to approve 2025-2026 stop loss insurance for employees with Voya. This is shown in attachment 13E.
Have so moved.
Colby second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. So we've had stop loss insurance in the past because we are self-insured for healthcare, but we are making a shift to a new individual to provide that service for a cost savings. Any questions for the financial team on this one? It was a very thorough memo, straightforward. Any public comment on this item? All right, board members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that item is passed. Agenda item 13F is a motion to approve the consent order as presented. This is shown in attachment 13F.
Have so moved.
Colby second.
Right, we got a theme. That's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? We've addressed some of this previously. Any public comment on this item? Board members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that item is passed. Agenda item 13G is a motion to approve the Act 93 Manager's Employee Handbook. This is shown in attachment 13G.
Anderson, so moved.
Colby second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion for HR? All right. Any public comment on this item? All right, board members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that item is passed. Agenda item 13H is a motion to approve the Administrative Support Group Employee Handbook. This is shown in attachment 13H.
Colby, so moved.
Have second.
Shaking it up. All right, I like it.
Change the order.
Are there any questions or discussion? So we have several handbooks in a row that we're going to go through to approve. All right. Any public comment on this item? Board members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And before I get too far down the list, I know there was one we pulled. It was the supervisor employee handbook, correct? The last one. So, okay. All right. Just making sure before I get there that I don't just start rambling off on that one. All right. We're going to do agenda item 13I. It's a motion to approve the SEAL supervisor employee handbook as shown in attachment 13I.
Miller, so moved.
All right.
Demo second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion for this one? This is a new handbook that we'll have specifically for our SEAL supervisors, which is our after-school program. Okay, any public comment on this item? Board members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that item is passed. Agenda item 13J is a motion to approve the Information Technology Employee Handbook. This is shown in attachment 13J.
Miller so moved.
Have second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion for this handbook? Yeah, Peter?
Because we have just moved through a whole spate of these,
Mhm.
can we just, would you mind just saying
What they are.
What they are? Because they really are some of the most incredibly mundane things. But watching a board just like kind of stamp through a bunch of these things like that,
Yeah.
someone wouldn't mind.
Oh, so Michelle's, I'm going to defer to the HR professional and let Michelle do it. So I don't misspeak. Thanks, Michelle. Just like general idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So 3 of these handbooks actually had expired last year, but the benefits were built in for this year. So that's why there's so many at one time. The Act 93 managers was set to expire July 1, so we did approve that prior to the expiration. So there was revision of language as we showed you in the highlighted items. Obviously, salary increases built into those. And I think just a general consistency among all of the agreements.
So the purpose it serves is kind of outlines both the salary and a variety of other aspects of the jobs of these different categories.
Benefits.
And these are employees that don't fall within a bargaining unit in our district. So that's part of the reason why we have
Correct.
these kind of
That's
groupings and systems.
Their evaluation, their salaries, their benefits, right?
Correct.
And they are very much inside the wheelhouse of what each of these units have to do.
That's correct.
Yeah, I just know sometimes, people are like, well,
what is that?
are they just,
Yes.
they're not talking about
Yes.
anything, and it's
We
Yeah.
do have quite a few agreements.
right.
Yes.
Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's
Really-
why I frequently say with these action items, this is an item we've discussed at a previous meeting, and it's here for approval.
It was definitely a labor of love for Randy and I working through this.
I have to
He
say.
just looked up in a certain way at you, just letting you know.
Yeah, and you certainly had because of the delays and other things, you had a big stack. So, and I know you put really diligent attention to these, so we do appreciate that.
But that being said, if anybody has any corrections when looking through them, please let us know.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so now I forget where I was.
Thank you.
We're on questions and discussion from the SEAL employee supervisor. Any public comment on item 13I? And I don't think we finished I, did we? That was when Peter asked the question? Or did we finish I? Are we on J? We're on J. All right. See, that's why I said I wasn't sure, because I lost my rhythm crossing out. Okay, so we're on item 13J. Deep apologies. All right, no more questions or discussion, no public comment on 13J. Board members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thanks for keeping me on task, gang, and that concludes the handbooks. That also concludes our agenda for this evening. Before I list future meetings, I just want to remind everyone that graduation is most likely this Friday at Memorial Field. Procession will start at 6:30. That's correct? Okay. So we're excited to do that and celebrate our seniors and hand out their diplomas. Additionally, our upcoming future meetings are June 16th. We'll have a regular board meeting at 7 p.m. here in Panorama Village Boardroom. July 15th is Policy Development Committee. That's at 1:30 here in the boardroom. July 21st will be another regular board meeting, again at 7 p.m. here in Panorama Village Boardroom. And with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting to an executive session of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. Have a good evening, everyone.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
Welcome to Center Volunteers in Medicine, where healing meets compassion and every patient is treated with dignity. Our new facility is designed to provide free quality healthcare to those in need. But to continue our mission, we need your help. Whether you're a healthcare professional or someone with a passion for helping others, there's a place for you here. And for those in need of our services, we are here to help. We provide quality medical, dental, and behavioral health care, as well as case management and prescription services, all free for those who qualify. But we can't do it alone. Your donation can make a difference in the lives of those who need it most. Center Volunteers in Medicine, caring, compassionate, and committed to our community. To learn more about becoming a patient, a volunteer, or supporting our mission, please visit www.cvim.net.